Hello, people. Welcome back. Chapter 3, Social Media Marketing, Network Structure, and Group Influences. If you're using an older edition, or the edition 2, I should say, it's Chapter 4. But just in case anybody has one of those, I thought I would just provide that for you. So with that said, away we go. Definitionally, what's a social network? A set of socially relevant nodes connected by one or more relations. All right. You should know the definition of a social network if we're going to be studying social media marketing and networks. So it's good to start with that. 6 degrees of separation. The concept of 6 degrees of separation is that in this connected world, which has been even more connected over the last decade or so with social media connections, everyone's connected to everyone else by no more than six degrees of separation, or 6 hops, you can see. Now you may think that's not true, but it is. The ties can be strong or weak, but we're all connected. You know, even to a person in Malaysia, somehow we have there's a connection. It was kind of popularized. I say popularized, but I have discussed this in other lectures and classes, and I find that younger folks may not be as familiar with it, but it was popularized a few years back when people started connecting themselves to Kevin Bacon, because he's been in so many things and has done so many things from such a young age. And it started being referred to as the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, that everybody, not just anybody in the world, but anybody in the world is connected to Kevin Bacon by 6 degrees or less. You can see this little slide. You can go all the way back to Vivian Lee, who was starting to Gone with the Wind. And you can see some of the connections might not be as tight, but there's a funny website, the Oracle of Bacon, which I have put down here at the bottom, oracleofbacon.org. You can go to and check it out. Here's an example. Zach Braff, who I hope everybody knows who that is. His Bacon number is 2. He was in Lennon or McCartney, the movie, with Gary Oldman. And Gary Oldman was in JFK with Kevin Bacon. So that gives Zach Braff a Bacon score of 2. So go check it out, the Oracle of Bacon, and enter in, maybe one of your famous or one of your favorite artists or authors or movie stars, or I should have said actors rather than movie stars, but you get it, and see if they're connected to Kevin Bacon. If they're very well known, they are somehow. So what do online communities have in common? And I'm going to say, what do successful or highly used or heavily used online communities have in common? Well, presence, which the authors define as the effect that people experience when they interact with a computer-mediated or computer-generated environment. So a good social media site will try to enhance that sense of presence, or the way they make it look and feel. If it looks and feels clunky and not current, that will depress its usage. Democracy. Social media websites are heavily democratized. In other words, you don't have to be of a certain type or class or caste to participate. Open to all, mostly, provided that you hold yourself to some norms, or on this slide, standards of behavior. What's a norm? It's what you in your mind consider to be appropriate behavior, right, in an online community. So if you need a more loose, dark, mysterious online community because you have some hurtful and strange things to say, you're not going to typically gravitate toward Instagram or Facebook. You're going to gravitate more to Gab or 8kun, which is the successor to 4chan, which is where people, you can get in some weird bubbles of conspiracy theories and weirdos. So most successful, popularly used online communities, there's expect some standards of behavior and some norms that most everybody adheres to. Sometimes you have to get called down on the carpet, and sometimes even banned or blocked. And then what makes the whole system roll? Participation. Sites that encourage participation are, especially new members, to get people to sign up and participate, are generally pretty successful because that's what drives the whole machine. If it's just me and you on a social media platform, then we could just be texting each other. If you can't run across an old girlfriend from high school or something, then why participate? Maybe that's not a great example, but you get what I mean. Social objects refers to social and is linked to social object theory. And what is that? Social object theory, posits that when people will participate on platforms where they're activated around something, some relationship that they have with people or objects, and an object being something of common interest. So, as an example, Dogster, people that are actively involved on Dogster, in this example, they're interested in dogs, right? Food allergies for dogs, and how do you protect yourself against boneheaded dog professionals, as it says on the slide. So if you think about the networks you use, what are the social objects that really activate your interest and participation there? Frequent social object of mine is the #1 rescue dog in Georgia for 10 years in a row, Leo Williams. That's his name from his baptism. Okay, I made that up. But anyway, Leo, you can see he's very popular on the internet and on Instagram. A lot of fans. And people gravitate to Leo Has an Underbite because they want to see what Leo's up to. He runs it himself. But you can see here he's obviously been barking because he has a little bark collar on. That must have been a long time ago. But he's been doing a little reading, studying. Over here with Dominique Wilkins in the background, the human highlight reel. There he is celebrating a birthday, about to eat a candle and a cake, looks like, because he can't have a birthday without a full ceremony, no doubt. And it's tough for him on social media, but he will. He doesn't have any thumbs, but he will. I caught him not too long ago. He was trying to, find a weekend date, and he was unsuccessful. So therefore, he was sad. So he obviously went then and hooked up the Wii. That's all this picture is, because that hasn't been in my house in a long time. But anyway, social object theory was the point there. So word of mouth. Word of mouth is the gold standard in marketing communications. That could be me and you standing in a parking lot talking about restaurants we like or don't like. If we didn't like it, that'd be negative word of mouth. If we did like it, it'd be positive word of mouth. And if the source credibility is high for me or you, meaning that we don't own the restaurant, we don't have an ownership stake in it, or we don't owe them a lot of money, and we have no connection to it at all, then it's very the persuasion of word of mouth is high. If we do it on the internet, we call that electronic word of mouth, or EWAM, which I've published several papers on. You can go to Google Scholar and find them if you want. So negative word of mouth is weighed more heavily than positive, and statistics indicate that each unhappy customer is likely to share their grievance with a minimum of 9 others. In a small group, tell everybody, the big complainers. So I have this picture of this goofy looking fella. He's not a goofy fella. I guess he's been very successful writing books. Malcolm Gladwell. You may have seen him in advertisements with Kevin Hart. They don't really say who he is. I just expect that he would know who he is with that hairdo. But the reason that I introduced him here is that he had a book. He wrote a book called Tipping Point, in which he explained that, or he outlined 3 factors that work to tip a trend or ignite an interest or cause virality of a post or a concept or idea or a meme or whatever, which he called law of the few, or he labeled them law of the few, stickiness, and the power of context. We're going to talk about a couple of those. But the law of the few, in his law of the few, in the book, he proposes that 3 types of people help spread viral messages. Mavens, and you may remember that concept from the previous marketing class. You may have called them market mavens. I typically do in the principles class. But those are people who are knowledgeable about things, many things or a few things. But that's the friend of yours you go to when you want to ask a question about a car or a computer or whatever. They can help to tip a trend. Connectors are people who know a lot of people and communicate with those people. Very outgoing, typically in nature, and they may communicate with them on the internet or maybe personally. So, the opposite of a recluse or a person that only knows 2 people and is related to both of those. And then salespeople who influence others with their natural persuasive power. They're excellent people to have on commercials, either online or over broadcast airwaves. They just have they just have natural persuasive power. People listen to them and they go, "Oh, that's what they're into. I might be into that as well." He didn't introduce the Pareto principle. I'm going to introduce it here, but that's the old 80-20 rule that you may have heard as 20% of the contributions or 80% of the contributions given to a church are given by 20% of the parishioners. 80% of the problems with customers come out of 20% of the customers. And he applies that to these as well, that 80% of the virality are people that push trends that come from 20% of the users, because most people follow that 20% of heavy social media users. But what's the stickiness of an idea? Anything about a website that encourages people to stay longer. If people stay for a long time, you call that a sticky website. Now, how can that measurement lead you to maybe some incorrect conclusions? Well, social media monitoring and measurement has gotten better and better and better. But still, if I go to a website and I click on an article or something that they have there, and then I remember that I have to take Leo to the vet, and the computer stays on, and I stay on that website, and that particular page is a website, for 2 hours, until I get back home, get back to my computer. They may think, "Oh man, that's a great page there. Really, look at this guy stayed on there for 2 hours. Really, I was at the vet with my dog." Uh, so that's an issue. So there are some problems with that, but keeping those instances out of it, the longer somebody stays, the better off it is for you, because that means they're absorbing your information. So what sort of influence does your group or a group have on, your social media usage, right? So do you check with just anybody when you're seeking advice about buying something? I mean, would you check with your grandmother before you bought a new gaming console? Probably not, right? Their knowledge of the or interest, expertise would affect you. Uh, an opinion leader is somebody who is frequently able to influence others' attitudes or behaviors. Uh, con men and evangelists frequently fall in that category, but they can just be a friend of yours who uh, owns a auto repair shop and is really into cars, and nobody pays them to, but they're just up on everything about cars. So they can influence people with just their knowledge. They may be an opinion leader in that. So what sort of sources uh, of the influence originate from power bases? So what's a power base? Well, French and Raven uh, compiled a list through research of 6 different power bases that people can occupy, either one or more than one. And I have them here on this slide. You can influence people because you have reward power. A person can give you what you want, right? If your boss wants, if you want a day off, then your boss has reward power for that, if you categorize that as an award. Or coercive power. You have the ability to punish people. So one way or another, I don't mean, they don't have to physically punish them, but that kind of person would have coercive power, because they could cause you trouble or punish you if you don't do something that they don't like. Legitimate power means that a person's appointed position, let's say they are, let's say they're the president of a university, and they've been assigned some rights, some power, because it comes with that position. They're able to do A, B, and C. The president of the university can do A, B, and C. So that's legitimate power. Referent power, authority through the motivation to identify with or please a person. Okay, you kind of, you know this person, you say, I'd like to be more like him or her for whatever reason. They're a great listener, or they hard worker, or very detail oriented, or honest, or whatever. That person would have referent power. Expert power would be someone who has expert skills and ability. So by virtue of the fact that I have an undergraduate degree and an MBA and a doctorate in marketing, I have expert power. If you ask me a question about some marketing concept or theory, you will probably accept it, or you would seek me out for that, versus somebody who had those the same degrees but in biology, right? They wouldn't have that expert power base. And information power, somebody who controls the flow and access to information. In North Korea, they don't have unfettered control to a free flow of information. That would be information power. So what makes up an opinion leader, right? Who's an opinion leader? Well, they're typically active and highly interconnected with people, both professionally and personally. They're likely to hold leadership positions because that type of person is generally one that people like to follow, and they're generally pretty ambitious, and they'll end up in leadership positions. Uh, they're similar to the consumer with respect to values and beliefs. We call that homophily. So they would have more sway over you if they were similar to you, in your opinion, right? That they would, a politician that you think is that man or woman is similar to me with respect. I believe this, and this is what I think. Uh, they could be an opinion leader to you. Slightly higher in terms of status and educational attainment, but not so high that you can't identify with them. But if they have more education than you, or there's maybe some social status, they're part of a club that you're not, they might help sway your opinion. And generally, they're the first to buy new products. So, when the new iPhone comes out, they generally have it. You see it and you go, okay, then you might go to them and go, hey, what's your opinion of that? Because you always seem to have the latest and greatest. So, it brings us to social capital. First bullets is just definitional. Accumulate a resource whose value flows to people as a result of their access to others. In other words, they're highly interconnected, and they may have social capital in your circle of friends or in your workplace or in your club or whatever, because they've accumulated those resources over time. And reputational capital. Shared beliefs, relationships, and actions of those in the community, such that our norms, behaviors, and values, they're shared and held by everybody, so they have a good community reputation. And so there are people in the community that have reputational capital because they do volunteer work, they're known in the community, people know them. But that all depends on where they are and what their background is. I mean, my reputational capital would probably be very hard to build up if I lived in an Amish community because I drove in and out in my Chevrolet pickup truck. And their norms don't intersect with that because they don't drive cars, and I wouldn't get out with my cell phone, which they don't use. So social capital and reputational capital, that's that concept. And then how tied are we to one another? Going back to the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, or 6 degrees of separation from one another. We can have strong ties or weak ties. And in respect of social media marketing, if you think about your social media platforms, you can apply this to that. You have core ties on social media. That's people that you have very close relationship. Or you can have weak ties. People maybe you just creep on. Maybe you're not even connected to them, so you just creep on them, on the lowdown. This is very superficial. Or you don't have very many connections. Let's say you're connected to somebody on LinkedIn or something because they of them because they're some kind of manager at a local utility or something, but that's really all you know about them. But you want to keep track in case you ever run across each other, need a job or something. And then we have significant ties. Those are people with you have a close connection, but less so than a core tie. So when you're thinking about your relationships on social media, it's a good way to categorize them as a core tie, a significant tie, or a weak tie. So that is those are the highlights of Chapter 3, Network Structure and Group Influences. And I will see you back here for our next engaging discussion.